So everybody's worried about China right now. Everybody's talking about China as though it could have another Lehman Brothers moment. I think it's worth taking a moment to actually figure out what they're talking about. Is it not? Because it's so important, as I always say, to be able to cut through the noise in this market. And this is one of those moments where you have a lot of noise. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. And yes, everybody's obsessed with Evergrande. Evergrande is the big Chinese conglomerate, the developer, right, that basically has a hand in every single real estate deal in every province all through China. They've been a big part of the expansion, the tremendous expansion that we've seen in China in recent years, a big part of that building process. And now you see they're struggling. They're struggling and they have debt payments that are due. And well, they're not able to make the payments on the bonds. That's really the heart of the issue. And so people are saying, okay, well, if they're not able to make these payments, will they be able to stay in business? And if they can't stay in business, what does that do to the world economy? In other words, is this China's Lehman moment? And if so, what is the spillover effect to everyone else? And therefore, should I be, dumping out of U.S. equities because I'm worried that China is going to have a big effect on things? These are fair questions. These are worthwhile questions. And so I think it's an important moment in time to kind of take a deep breath, to think about what this company is, what this company represents, and how affected American corporations and American stockholders, right, investors in American companies might be, how they might be affected by all of this. First of all, you should know that there's a lot of outstanding debt, right? This is a really, really big company. They've been building all over China. Like I said, they've basically had a hand in like some building in every single province all throughout the country. And we're talking about a really big country. They have about $300 billion that they owe in debt. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? That's a lot of money. And so if they default on all that debt, yes, it would be very concerning. Well, we saw on Thursday of last week that Evergrande did make a debt payment to some holders of those instruments, but those holders were in China. So the international ones were like, good luck, right? So if you're a U.S. holder of Evergrande debt, well, you know what? You probably shouldn't have been buying debt in a Chinese company, only because I look at it and say, when I'm going to buy debt in a company, why would I buy in a company where I'm not going to be protected by U.S. law? Thank you very much. So there's a little bit of buyer beware in this, right? And I realized that it was a very important company and a very big company, and everybody thought it was going to be fine. It may be fine for the Chinese. I mean, like I said, good luck if you're an American. And I think you always need to think through all that as you invest. Think about, is the law on my side if this company goes belly up? I mean, is the CCP really going to be looking out for Joe shareholder in the USA? I don't think so. But they are looking out for the Chinese, and they're very concerned about making sure that this doesn't actually have a contagion effect that's going to affect negatively the Chinese economy. So you need to, again, cut through the noise and understand what's real and what's not. It's very real. It's very much a possibility that international debt holders could get kind of wiped out. Equity holders certainly could get wiped out. But at the same time, the Chinese government has an interest in protecting this company because it's a big company, it's an important company, and you know what? A lot of people in China, they gave this company their life savings and said, build me a house, build me an apartment. And they put all that money into that real estate purchase. And if they put all that money down and the company doesn't deliver and then those families are out, well, you can imagine that a lot of families are going to be really angry and really upset, and the country's dealing with enough right now. Do they really need the headache of all these people saying, whoa, wait a second, not to mention the headache of what you would see ensue in the financial markets, right? As everybody starts saying, whoa, this is one big hot potato. So I think the comparisons to Lehman are interesting and at least worth looking at, but you also have to simultaneously understand the USA is not the CCP, and the Communist Party of China has no interest in seeing this company go down in flames. Not that the U.S. did either. It's just the U.S. was willing to sit back and say, okay, let's see what happens. I don't think a highly managed economy such as China's is quite as willing to do that. And thus, I would say everybody needs to kind of take a deep breath, recognize this for what it is, also recognize that you need to be careful about where you put your money and where you invest. And, I just keep going back to, you want to make sure you understand everything, including the laws of the land of the companies in which you're investing in. And so I wouldn't have put money in this one to begin with. But for those that did, understand that you might not get what you thought out of the thing, but I don't think it's going to be a disaster situation like 2008. I really don't, because for what it's worth, the CCP is there and they control so much of the banking system. They control everything. And I don't like that either. But I'm only pointing out that in this particular case, it may not be quite as awful as people think. That said, there's another kind of awfulness to this, and they run the risk that by propping a company like this and others up, they can find themselves pretty quickly in a situation such as we have seen take place in Japan, where you had so much government involvement and manipulation, and after a while, these companies, they turn into like a bunch of GEs. Nothing against General Electric, but you know what happened with GE. I mean, well, there was the accounting issues that they had on the on GE finance arm, which we'll save for another day. But the reality is the company got just too big, right? Too big, and they didn't really know what they were doing, and there wasn't the same kind of pressure that they needed from frankly, the free market and shareholders for a while, until, of course, the market figured out what the heck was going on, which is, by the way, the saving grace of the market, right? You want those checks and balances. You want investors to be able to say, hang on. But if you have the government, they're effectively propping everything up, then investors don't have the opportunity to do this. And so China could run into that issue, shall we say, in that you don't have enough sort of raw capitalism at play. But I would just say everybody should take this for what it's worth. Be very careful about where you're investing in the world, and recognize that China probably is seeing that it's in its interest to not let this company go completely belly up. But I do have concerns about over-meddling, shall we say, from the government, which is something that we're seeing in China, we've seen in Japan, and I worry about happening here. I mean, you see it with the Federal Reserve, kind of feeling like, that too big to fail thing is very much in place still right now. And I think that there's an effort to try and save our economy by any means necessary. And so this is partly why you're seeing the Federal Reserve say it's so committed to money printing. They're very concerned too, I think sort of needlessly so, about the potential for default. I really don't think that's going to happen. I mean, if it does happen, then, the president's really going to have a whole bunch of stuff on his plate in terms of being just, really bad, right? I mean, if we default on our debt, then, we really are no better than a banana republic. So let's put that aside for a moment and hope that smarter heads prevail, and that we're not looking at any scenario quite like that. All that said, we do run the risk that there is too much interference, that you have government and lobbyists basically sort of involved at too big a level. And so consequently, there's not enough sort of power to the people, which means you don't have enough power for capitalism to really function, I think, as it needs to. Really, at its heart, capitalism is about freedom, and in its best sense, really employs sort of the best aspects of freedom. And I realize it's not perfect, don't get me wrong. It's absolutely not perfect, and there are things that we could and should and do try to do to massage this along the way. But ultimately, you want to make sure that it's freedom and free markets that are governing where we put our money and where we invest and where we put our capital, because that is the best predictor of a profitable, prosperous outcome in the future. And unfortunately, in the environment in such we live right now, I mean, I think ESG is a great example of this. I mean, very noble ideas. You want to be environmentally, socially conscious when you invest. And there's this theory that now a company has to, not a theory, I mean, it's kind of a mandate, right? All these mutual funds that are putting money to work, they're like, okay, well, are you ESG approved? Are you ESG? Are you environmentally, socially conscious? Do you have this good governance? And so that is now taking a priority over, say, the balance sheet. Well, that's kind of a problem in that we're losing our way. And again, I don't take issue with, you know what, if you want to invest in wind and solar energy companies, by all means, and you think that that is the best, most prosperous way for the future, by all means, go ahead and do it. But what are we doing when we say, okay, this is the only thing that we're going to really allow people to invest in, and we're going to exclude the others? Well, that's a whole other ballgame. And that's when you get big government intervening with capitalism in a way that really restricts freedom and free enterprise and is somewhat akin to what we're seeing in China. Like China, I promise, is probably not going to let this big company, this real estate company, fail. Much like the US right now doesn't want these ESG companies to fail. And ultimately, unless we're going to go down the path, and I certainly would hope, for gosh sakes, that we don't go down that path of becoming like China, ultimately, you run the risk that you're creating a kind of bubble, because you have to ask, is any of this real? Again, if you believe that solar energy is the way of the future, and I do think it's going to have a big part in our future, then yes, you want to be invested in those companies. But if you're investing just because it seems like it's politically correct, well, then that's a whole other problem. In other words, you want a marriage of actual fundamentals, and then, hey, the political correctness, I get it, right? You know, you're going to see a lot of companies try and put money into these things. That could help a stock, but ultimately you run the risk that if you're not investing in something because it is the right thing for the economy at this time and has the best growth prospect, then that creates a whole other problem and a whole other kind of bubble. And so I just want to flag this right now as we watch what's unfolding right now in China, which gets me, by the way, to the Fed again, and the Fed sort of interference in what we're dealing with right now, because inflation just is a reality, and it's going to continue to be a reality in this environment. You can't print this much money and not expect to have some kind of consequences associated with that. You look around right now, I worry about the economy because I don't know how our economy is going to keep expanding when people don't want to go to work. I mean, and that's just the reality. They don't want to go to work. They have learned in some ways to do perhaps more with less. They have learned that they can get certain handouts and benefits from the government. And there's a whole sort of gig underground economy going on where people can make money and maybe not have to pay tax on it. And I think that that's becoming increasingly attractive, which puts us closer and closer to looking like Europe. I mean, that's one of the problems, right? Think about Greece, that Greece had. Nobody was paying their taxes. I mean, and I know that Joe Biden wants to, clean this up by hiring more IRS agents, but that's not the answer. I mean, for goodness sakes, he himself was looking for aggressive means to try and avoid taxes. The $500,000 he saved on employee payroll taxes because he put himself into an S corporation for all his speaking gigs and his book. I'm sorry. I mean, it's an aggressive thing to do. And the House Ways and Means Committee is looking into it, and some people are saying, well, maybe it's too aggressive. We shall see. But any way you slice it, it was a very aggressive tax move. And that is what happens, right, when you have so many onerous taxes. So to me, the answer is, well, you just make it easy. You say, okay, well, let's have a flat tax. Let's be fair. And let's keep it low enough that people are incentivized to go to work and they don't see that tax, call it 10%, right? Let's just call it 10%. Could be less across the board. They don't see that tax as an impediment. But right now, we have an economy that runs the risk of becoming quite broken because people aren't interested in going to work right now. And you couple that with simultaneously the inflation that we're seeing, and you've got real problems. And this is inflation. And I think that, and I keep telling people about this, you need to actually think through how you are going to manage your portfolio for the future, especially if you want to retire one day. I mean, hey, I guess if you're going to just work forever, then you can maybe keep up with inflation. But if you have a set amount of money that you want to live off of, and you think, okay, whatever the number, for round numbers, let's just say you're going to live off $1,000 a week. By the way, we have a great article on trishintel.com. Forgive me, $1,000 a month. Great article. You can live in like the lap of luxury in one country on $1,200 US a month. So it's nice to know that your dollar still goes somewhere. Again, that's on my website, trishintel.com. We take a look at, a bunch of places around the world where you might be able to retire and live decently well. But if you want to stay in your same hometown, if you want to live in the US and you're going to be living on a very fixed income, you've got to factor in inflation. And inflation is increasingly growing worse. It's at 5.3% right now after having been at 5.4% for the last couple of months, but I expect it's going to get worse only because I'm looking at consumer prices and I'm looking at producer prices, and I know that that's going to transition into consumer prices. So producer prices are quite high. You're seeing those upwards of 8%. They have to either absorb those costs, which means lower profits and probably less employees, etc., or they then transfer those costs on to their customers. And increasingly what we're seeing is those costs are getting transferred onto customers. So you can expect, by the way, even if best case scenario, you're looking at 2% inflation a year, that adds up over time. So in the future, if you're going to be on a fixed income, you want to make sure that you have hedged out inflation. I think the best way to do that, there's several different ways. I like real estate. I like being in equities in general, but I really, really like gold. And if you listen to this show, I like gold because I talk about it a lot, and I want to encourage you to look at it too. And I want you to do so by calling my friends at Legacy Precious Metals, one of the sponsors of this show. It's great because we're so aligned, and these guys have been in business for more than 40 years, and they know how much I care about telling you how you need to allocate a certain part of your portfolio to this, because it's just important that you diversify. And diversification is the tool for everything. Gold should be part of that diversification. I want to give you their phone number. If you're watching this on video, you can see it on the bottom of your screen. But the number is 866-589-0560. Again, for all of our friends, and I hope you are downloading this on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For our friends that are watching the full audio version of the program, it's 866-589-0560. Inflation very much is a reality. It's here. It's going to stay. I don't see that changing. And so again, I want to encourage everyone to make sure that you are providing for yourself in your future. There's an article I wanted to tell you about in the Washington Post that just came out. They say that Supreme Court observers see trouble ahead. They said that this is a very interesting piece, and I think it's actually spot on, it's rare that I agree with the Washington Post, but occasionally, we have these moments, and I like to celebrate them here on the Trish Regan Show. The Washington Post is saying that the Supreme Court is becoming so political that everyday Americans are really seeing all of these justices as political animals. And that is a problem. That does spell trouble for sure. Especially when you have the President of the United States looking at establishing a commission so that they can examine the court and look at putting more justices on the court that would be aligned with his party's view. The danger, of course, in that is that our court should not be viewed as political. It needs to be above politics for sure. And once it sort of sinks down to that political level, once Americans view it as a politicized entity, then it loses its credibility and it loses its power. And so this is actually a very important moment, and we do run the risk that the Democrats are going to try to pack the court. And by the way, hey, let's be clear, I think conservatives would try the same. This is unfortunately the reality of the new world in which we live that is so highly polarized and so highly political. And so I care so much about making sure that we ensure and we protect the sanctity of that court. And it's one of the reasons I'm going to encourage you, the URL is actually on the screen. I want to encourage you to go to supremecoup.com, Supreme, C-O-U-P, aptly named, don't you think, in light of what we've seen in the likes of Venezuela and Argentina. Supremecoup.com. This is a website that was set up for my friends at First Liberty, which is a nonprofit law firm, nonprofit law firm that is taking this on as a cause right now. And they are doing what they can to try and get the message out, to get the message to the president that packing the court would not be okay. And so they are sending a letter, and I want you to sign that letter. If you can, go to supremecoup, C-O-U-P.com, supremecoup.com, and join this wonderful group at First Liberty. A lot of good folks involved, including the Heritage Foundation, Americans for Prosperity, many, many, many more. They have assembled well over 100,000 signatures, and you can be part of this. So again, supremecoup.com for more. It's important right now. I mean, there's a lot going on. It disturbs me how polarized this moment in time is, and I worry increasingly about our country, and I worry about making sure that all voices are heard. Certainly, I think those of us that are more conservative and view the importance of capitalism as something that's really going to take this nation forward and help grow it for the next generation, that's all very much at risk. And so I want to encourage you to go to trishaintel.com. That's my website. Do sign up for my newsletter. It's free. I'm here every single day. You'll get this podcast delivered right to your inbox every single day. You can shop the store. We've got lots of good freedom-loving items on the store, and you can help support it that way. But again, I appreciate you being here. I know how much freedom matters to you. It certainly is just the essence of who I am, and I want to make sure that truth is told, truth is heard, and that we do all we can to protect this nation. It's a very tricky time. So do me that favor, go to trishaintel.com, and I will be right back here with you tomorrow.